Prologue Part 1 of I Will Repay. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Annie Kirkpatrick. I Will Repay by Baroness Orczy. Prologue Part 1. Paris, 1783. Coward! 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 The words rang out, clear, strident, passionate, in a crescendo of agonised humiliation. The boy, quivering with rage, had sprung to his feet, and, losing his balance, he fell forward clutching at the table, whilst with the convulsive movement of the lids, he tried in vain to suppress the tears of shame which were blinding him. "Coward!" He tried to shout the insult so that all might hear, but his parched throat refused him service, his trembling hand sought the scattered cards upon the table. He collected them together quickly, nervously, fingering them with feverish energy, then he hurled them at the man opposite, whilst with the final effort he still contrived to mutter "Coward!" The older men tried to interpose, but the younger ones only laughed, quite prepared for the adventure which must inevitably ensue, the only possible ending to a quarrel such as this. Conciliation or arbitration was out of the question. Déroulède should have known better than to speak disrespectfully of Adèle de Montchéri, when the little Vicomte de Marny's infatuation for the notorious beauty had been the talk of Paris and Versailles these many months past. Adèle was very lovely and a veritable tower of greed and egotism. The Marnys were rich and the little Vicomte very young, and just now the brightly plumaged hawk was busy plucking the latest pigeon, newly arrived from its ancestral cote. The boy was still in the initial stage of his infatuation. To him, Adèle was a paragon of all the virtues, and he would have done battle on her behalf against the entire aristocracy of France, in a vain endeavour to justify his own exalted opinion of one of the most dissolute women of the epoch. He was a first-rate swordsman too, and his friends had already learned that it was best to avoid all allusions to Adèle's beauty and weaknesses. But Déroulède was a noted blunderer. He was little versed in the manners and tones of that high society in which, somehow, he still seemed an intruder. But for his great wealth, no doubt, he would never have been admitted within the intimate circle of aristocratic France. His ancestry was somewhat doubtful, and his coat of arms unadorned with quarterings. But little was known of his family or the origin of his wealth. It was only known that his father had suddenly become the late King's dearest friend, and commonly surmised that Déroulède gold had, on more than one occasion, filled the empty coffers of the first gentleman of France. Déroulède had not sought the present quarrel. He had merely blundered in that clumsy way of his, which was no doubt a part of the inheritance bequeathed to him by his bourgeois ancestry. He knew nothing of the little Vicomte's private affairs, still less of his relationship with Adèle, but he knew enough of the world and enough of Paris to be acquainted with the lady's reputation. He hated at all times to speak of women. He was not what in those days would be termed a ladies' man, and was even somewhat unpopular with the sex. But in this instance the conversation had drifted in that direction, and when Adèle's name was mentioned, everyone became silent save the little Vicomte, who waxed enthusiastic. A shrug of the shoulders on Déroulède's part had aroused the boy's ire, then a few casual words, and, without further warning, the insult had been hurled and the cards thrown in the older man's face. Déroulède did not move from his seat. He sat erect and placid, one knee crossed over the other, his serious, rather swarthy face perhaps a shade paler than usual. Otherwise it seemed as if the insult had never reached his ears, or the cards struck his cheek. He had perceived his blunder just 20 seconds too late. Now he was sorry for the boy and angered with himself, but it was too late to draw back. To avoid a conflict he would at this moment have sacrificed half his fortune, but not one particle of his dignity. He knew and respected the old Duc de Marny, a feeble old man now, almost a dotard whose hitherto spotless blason the young Vicomte, his son, was doing his best to besmirch. When the boy fell forward, blind and drunk with rage, Déroulède leant towards him automatically, quite kindly, and helped him to his feet. He would have asked the lad pardon for his own thoughtlessness, had that been possible, but the stilted code of so-called honour forbade so logical a proceeding. It would have done no good, and could but imperil his own reputation without averting the traditional sequel. The panelled walls of the celebrated gaming saloon had often witnessed scenes such as this. All those present acted by routine. The etiquette of duelling prescribed certain formalities, and these were strictly but rapidly adhered to. The young Vicomte was quickly surrounded by a close circle of friends. His great name, his wealth, his father's influence, had opened for him every door in Versailles and Paris. But at this moment he might have had an army of seconds to support him in the coming conflict. Déroulède for a while was left alone near the card table, where the unsnuffed candles began smouldering in their sockets. He had risen to his feet, somewhat bewildered at the rapid turn of events. His dark, restless eyes wandered for a moment around the room, as if in quick search for a friend. But where the Vicomte was at home by right, Déroulède had only been admitted by reason of his wealth. His acquaintances and sycophants were many, but his friends were very few. For the first time this fact was
Sample complete. Ready to continue?